Unit 5, Lesson 2. What is light? Read aloud. Good morning, my friend, said a smiling Mr. Samuel Van Lumen. It's so good to see you. I see you're already working, replied Jack Adair as he pushed open the creaky garden gate. What are you painting today? Well, I'm painting the roses that have just begun to bloom, replied Samuel. I'm taking advantage of the early morning sunlight. As you know, my eyes are not what they used to be, sighed Samuel. Sadly, I can only paint for an hour each day. You'll have to speak up, Samuel. I'm a little hard of hearing, said Jack with a laugh. How about we sit under the oak tree? Replied Samuel. I just made some lemonade. I'm hot standing in the sunlight. My eyes are tired. Samuel and Jack walked slowly toward the shade of the giant oak tree and settled themselves into two comfortable garden chairs. Samuel picked up a pitcher of ice-cold lemonade and poured it into two sparkling glasses. Both men were silent for a long while, until at last Samuel spoke. I have been pondering life, said Samuel, speaking loudly so that Jack could hear him. I have such wonderful memories, and you are in many of them. I'm glad to hear that, said Jack. Now that your eyes and my ears are failing, we should strike a deal. I will be your eyes if you will be my ears, Jack exclaimed rather loudly. The two men laughed. At that precise moment, Samuel's dog Alfie came to join them. Alfie stretched and yawned and then curled up in the shade between the two friends. Tell me, said Jack, what is the painter's most valued tool? Light, shouted Samuel. Let me tell you why light is so extraordinary. Samuel lifted himself out of his garden chair and stood beneath the giant oak. As he stood, he gazed out into his beautiful garden that was bursting with color and scent and began to speak. Our main source of light and heat is the sun, a hot star, a glowing gas, Samuel smiled as he went on. Light illuminates objects and makes them visible. Light spreads out in all directions. Because of light, our eyes and our brains are able to form pictures of the world we live in. I've spent my life painting those pictures. Light gives us every sunrise and every sunset. Without light, there's only darkness. Jack stared up into the sky. I've always wondered how exactly light reaches us here on Earth. The sun's more than 92 million miles away. Samuel nodded. It is difficult to comprehend how it takes a mere 8 minutes for light from the sun to reach us here on Earth. Light travels in the form of tiny waves called light waves, explained Samuel. These light waves travel in straight paths called rays. Rays of light waves travel at the fastest speed possible in a vacuum, a place that has no tiny particles or bits of matter. Because of most of outer space has very few particles, it is a vacuum, and light travels there at the remarkable speed of approximately 186,000 miles a second. Jack sat shaking his head and then took a sip of the refreshingly cool lemonade. That's a lot to think about, he admitted. Sure is, agreed Samuel, smiling. Scientists are still studying and learning many new things about light, including that in special situations, light can act like a stream instead of a wave. Jack shook his head. Figuring out how light works must be complicated, but it is indeed fascinating. Samuel nodded. Light from the sun reaches Earth because it can pass so quickly through outer space. There's almost nothing to block its path. Once light reaches Earth's atmosphere, it slows down a little bit. The atmosphere is like a blanket of air full of gases and moisture that covers the Earth. This blanket of air slows the light down. Then, Samuel continued, the speed of light slows down even more because objects start getting in the way of the light rays. Samuel pointed to the lemonade. For example, rays of waves move more slowly when traveling through liquids such as this lemonade. Then Samuel pointed to the oak tree. Light waves can't pass through other objects such as this beautiful oak tree. Because rays of light waves travel in a straight line, they can't bend around the tree either. Instead, they leave a shadow or shade on the other side of the tree. Well, I, like Alfie, am enjoying sitting in the cool shade where there is clearly less heat and light, pronounced Jack as he sipped his lemonade. At that precise moment, as if he heard his name, Alfie leaped out from under Samuel's chair and jumped high into the air in pursuit of a buzzing bumblebee. Both men stopped talking to watch the dog's frantic attempt to capture the bee, but to no avail. The bee seemed to float away on the warm summer breeze, no doubt in search of a sweetly scented flower to pollinate. Another important thing to remember is that light is fuel for our planet, announced Samuel. Light is energy. Energy from the sun supports all forms of life on this planet. Without light and heat from the sun, the farmer would not have food to harvest. In fact, we could not exist on Earth. Hmm. Speaking of food, exclaimed Jack. Yes, indeed, said Samuel. I think I've exhausted us both, and it's almost time for lunch. What do you say we go in the kitchen and get something to eat? I say that's the best thing I've heard all day, laughed Jack. And I smell something delicious coming from the house. The two men made their way into the coolness of the kitchen and prepared themselves a lunch of homemade zucchini bread and fresh fruits and vegetables gathered from Samuel's garden. They sat at the table next to the kitchen window and talked about old times as they ate their meal. They recalled how they had first become friends in elementary school. They had been in the same third grade class together, and they had both been keen baseball players. They had gone to high school together and then on to the same college where Samuel had studied art and Jack had studied music. They had even been soldiers together. Eventually, Samuel and Jack had both married and had children. Their wives became good friends, and their children grew up playing with each other. Sadly, both of their wives had died. Their children were now adults, with children of their own. Before they knew it, several hours had passed and the bright sun had set. Samuel and Jack were now sitting on the porch in the shimmering twilight. Sounds of various night creatures were beginning to echo in the still of the evening. Won't be long before the stars are twinkling in the night sky and the moon is shining brightly, said Jack. It's almost time for me to go. Samuel gazed silently at the emerging night sky. They both sat together, enjoying the cooler evening air. Eventually, Samuel spoke. Isn't it amazing that stars make their own light, but the moon does not? Sunlight bounces off the moon to make it look like it's shining brightly in the night sky, mused Samuel. Of course, I could sit here all night and talk about why light is so important, not only for myself as a painter, but for our very existence, he said contemplatively. That's a fact, replied Jack, smiling at his friend. Samuel smiled too. Jack, how about we go fishing tomorrow morning? Asked Samuel. Sounds good to me, said Jack as he stood up to go. As you know, I am the better fisherman. It will be a miracle, Samuel Van Lumen, if you catch a single fish. We'll see about that, exclaimed Jack, as he watched his best friend walk slowly down the garden path and through the creaky garden gate.